He thought she was just a part of his past, but he was wrong. A viral video forced him to leave everything behind. What he did next will change the way you look at gratitude forever. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel so stories like this can inspire you in real life. Now, focus on the story. On an ordinary morning in 2023, Jimmy Butler was browsing social media when he came across an interesting video that turned his whole day and almost his entire life upside down. In the video, his 80-year-old former nanny, Evelyn Brooks, was cleaning offices to make a living. Despite the pain in her joints, she was determined to keep cleaning, even late at night. Seeing this elderly woman broke Jimmy's heart. She was not just a caregiver who shared his childhood. She was also a mentor who shaped his personality, character, and values. To truly understand this story, however, we must go back to 1994 when Jimmy was 6. At that time, his father, Raymond Butler, was at the peak of his NBA career with the Chicago Bulls. He was often away on business trips, so Diana Butler was forced to take care of Jimmy and his 4-year-old brother Malik on her own. One day, Diana approached her husband, Raymond, looking tired and sad with tears in her eyes. She said, "My life isn't just about looking after children. We need someone who can shape their characters." They had already started looking for a mature, sensible nanny by that time. Then, a woman recommended by the local church came into their lives, Evelyn Brooks. She was 52 years old, widowed, and a former elementary school teacher. After teaching for 25 years, she retired early to care for her husband, who had cancer. After his death, Evelyn found herself alone and struggling to make ends meet. However, her need for this job was not primarily for money. Rather, it gave her a sense of purpose. During their first meeting, she told Diana, "To be honest, I don't need a job. I need a purpose. Children have always been my purpose. Some people enter our lives at just the right moment, as if the universe sent them to us." That's exactly how Evelyn came into our lives. On her first day of work, she arrived at their house at 7 a.m. Even when the children's mother, Raymond, was home, Evelyn never neglected her duties and took them very seriously. Her role was not just to babysit, but also to be a character coach. When she first met Jimmy, she got down to his level, looked him in the eyes and said, "Hello, Jimmy. I want to teach you something very important. Hello, Jimmy. I want to teach you something very important. Now listen to me carefully. Never forget that true greatness comes not from talent, but from character. Talent is something you are born with. That's true. But what's really necessary is character, which we build every day through our choices. Never forget that." Although Jimmy couldn't fully understand these words because of his age, he could sense the love, seriousness, and warmth in Evelyn's voice. Finally, this little boy had learned to truly listen to her. From day one, Evelyn had observed Jimmy's behavior. Naturally, she was a bit competitive with her little brother. She was energetic and athletic. Of course, there were aspects of her that needed refining and guidance. For example, she was impatient, angry when she lost, and occasionally displayed superiority toward her peers. One day, while Jimmy was bragging to the neighborhood kids about his father being an NBA player, Evelyn called out to him, "Jimmy, come here. I want to tell you a nice story about 2 children." Evelyn wanted to put her pedagogical genius into action. She didn't teach lessons in a boring way, but rather through stories that could serve as examples. These stories became seeds that sprouted in the imaginations of children like them. This is what she said in her story. "Listen, Jimmy. Once upon a time, there were 2 children. One was very talented. He always won. The other child was ordinary, but got along well with everyone, big and small. He helped others and said thank you. Which child do you think people liked more?" Jimmy answered without hesitation, "The winner." Of course, Evelyn shook her head and said that was wrong. "No, Jimmy. People like those who make them feel important and care about them." When these 2 children grew up, the ordinary child became extraordinary. He had already learned to make people feel good and care about them. These words left a deep impression on Jimmy's young heart. He didn't realize it at the time, but years later, his decisions would be the fruit of the seeds planted in this story. Evelyn's house rules were simple, yet unbreakable. Every adult had to be greeted with "Good morning." Nothing could be asked for without saying please and thank you. Everyone had to help with the housework. Most importantly, never brag about your achievements. If you want to be a special person, let people figure it out through your actions, Evelyn would say. Jimmy mostly played basketball in the garden. Even when he made difficult shots, Evelyn didn't applaud. But when he missed, she praised his effort in the best way possible. One day, Jimmy asked curiously, "Evelyn, why aren't you happy when I make good shots?" Evelyn smiled and said, "Of course I'm happy, Jimmy, but you don't surprise me. You're already a talented child. What really makes me proud is that you help your brother Malik, never give up when you fail, and congratulate your opponents respectfully." Jimmy was silent for a few seconds. His young heart couldn't fully comprehend the weight of her words, but he could feel that he had learned something important. That day, for the first time, he began to understand that his behavior was more important than how many shots he made. This realization would stay with him throughout his life. Of course, Evelyn Brooks didn't just teach children such basic rules. She taught them how to be human beings. She taught them that a real man should be strong, kind, helpful, and respectful. Making his bed, washing small dishes, and helping with dinner were no longer chores for Jimmy. They were a natural part of growing up. Kind and respectful men take care of themselves and always help others, Evelyn always said. But perhaps the most important lesson was this: people should value their human connections. Evelyn greeted the school janitors, knew the names of supermarket cashiers and other employees, and looked waiters in the eye when she said, "Thank you." Although Jimmy didn't understand it at the time, Evelyn's approach to people left an indelible mark on him. "Remember, Jimmy, you must treat everyone well throughout your life, sweetheart," she would say. "Because if you ever have to come back, you never know who you'll find waiting for you, son." The years passed quickly. In 1999, Raymond retired from the NBA and no longer needed a full-time caregiver. Evelyn's farewell was not easy. She had become part of the family, not just an employee. On the day they said goodbye, Jimmy was 11 years old, taller, and his voice had deepened slightly. He turned to Evelyn and showed her the small cross he was holding. It was the most precious possession her late husband had left her. "Jimmy, I want to give this to you," Evelyn said, placing it around his neck, "so that you will remember me and never forget who you are." Jimmy held the cross tightly in both hands and silently promised, "I promise you, I will never forget what you taught me." Evelyn whispered through her tears, "I promise you, Evelyn, I will always be proud of you and what you have done for me." With these words, their paths diverged. As Jimmy entered adolescence and began his journey to stardom, the seeds Evelyn had planted continued to sprout, shaping his character. Unfortunately, not every bright future has a happy ending. Sadly, Evelyn's life did not progress as positively as Jimmy's. When Jimmy started at Marquette University, Evelyn was sometimes on his mind. During difficult exam weeks and low morale, especially during training sessions, her voice always rang in his ears. Although the small cross necklace he wore under his uniform was not visible, it was always with him. One day, when he was alone with his father, Raymond said to him, "You know what? Sometimes I feel like I can still hear a voice inside me. It always reminds me to do the right thing. It's as if Ms. Evelyn is still trying to teach me something." Raymond smiled. "What you're feeling is called a conscience, son. The fact that you have a conscience like that is undoubtedly because you learned from a valuable teacher like Evelyn." Jimmy tried to find Evelyn several times. Once, when he was passing through Houston, he went to her old address. Unfortunately, a different family was living there now. She didn't have a social media account or any other way for Jimmy to reach her. Even in this digital age, the people who leave the biggest mark on our lives can disappear in an instant. Ultimately, only the shadows shaped by those beautiful memories remain. Jimmy joined the NBA in 2009 and married Layla in 2011. He had finally started his own family. As the years passed, traces of the woman who had once shaped his character seemed to fade, but never completely disappeared. Meanwhile, another life was unfolding in Houston. Evelyn Brooks was quietly struggling. The rising cost of living, her insufficient pension, and her health problems had all piled up. In 2010, at age 68, she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The medication was more expensive than it should have been. It was also difficult to keep track of. One day, when her close friend and neighbor Clara Washington offered to help, Evelyn just shook her head. "I raised that boy to be independent and strong, Clara. How could she ask him for help now? That would be hypocritical." Clara insisted. "Look, Evelyn, you didn't just raise Jimmy. You helped him become an honest, decent person. Now you have to let him help you." Evelyn repeated her words with the same sharp determination. "I did my job. Clara found her own way. I can never be a burden to Jimmy." This answer revealed one of the painful truths of our lives. Sometimes pride causes us to reject the compassion of those we love most. In 2012, when Evelyn was 70 years old, she made a heartbreaking decision. It forced her to return to work, but this time, it wasn't a school classroom or a nursing job. It was the kind of work that no one would choose to do unless they had to: night cleaning. In her new job, she found work that was far removed from technology and physically demanding, but honest. She started every night at 11 p.m. in an office building downtown and worked until 5 a.m. "At least I can walk around with my dignity intact during the day," she said. Her hands, now trembling due to her illness, once wrapped around Jimmy. Now, due to the cleaning chemicals, they were changing shape a little more every day. But Evelyn didn't care, and she never lost her dignity or kindness, even under the harshest conditions. Over time, everyone who worked in the building came to know her. One of the security guards, 23-year-old Jordan Ellis, would occasionally strike up a conversation with her. One night, he asked the question that would change the entire story. "Ms. Evelyn, did you really raise Jimmy Butler from childhood until he was older?" Evelyn smiled at him. As always, she enjoyed talking about Jimmy. "Yes, son. But what made him special wasn't just his talent. It was his heart, too. He chose to be a good listener and knew how to treat people well. That's why he was so special." At that moment, Evelyn was unaware of anything. Jordan had secretly recorded the conversation on his phone. "Ms. Evelyn, do you miss him very much?" Jordan asked. Evelyn was silent. Then, with her words caught in her throat, she whispered, "Every day, son. But what matters is this. He's flying on his own wings now. I'm always proud of him." That night, Jordan Ellis shared the video on social media. Nothing was ever the same again. The video started as a small wave. Within a few hours, it reached hundreds of viewers. By morning, thousands of people had been touched by the story of an elderly woman cleaning an office late at night. The words that came out of her mouth seemed to echo from a deep well of time, touching everyone's heart at once. "Yes, I raised Jimmy, that boy, but his talent wasn't his difference. It was his heart." By 9 a.m., Jimmy Butler was still asleep. His phone was flooded with hundreds of notifications. Then suddenly the phone rang. It was Sarah Chen, the Miami Heat's social media manager, on the phone. She sounded both excited and nervous. "Jimmy, your social media account is blowing up right now. Your name has been tagged thousands of times on Twitter. But don't worry, it's not a scandal. It's emotional. A woman named Evelyn Brooks says she raised you as a child. She says she raised you as a child." The video has received 2 million views since this morning. Jimmy paused for a moment. When he heard the name Evelyn, his heart almost stopped. "Send it right away, Sarah. I have to watch it." When the video opened, the image was a little shaky, but that voice, it had never changed. Years had passed. Her hair had turned white and her hands were wrinkled, but Evelyn's posture, voice, and manner of speaking hadn't changed at all, just like back then. Jimmy's breath caught in his throat as he watched the video. Evelyn's voice seemed to whisper from the dusty shelves of Jimmy's childhood bedroom. "Do you miss him?" "Every day, son. But here's what's important. He's flying with his own wings now. I'm always proud of him." Jimmy couldn't hold back his tears. In one swift motion, he took the cross necklace off and held it in his hand. The small cross necklace he had carried for years trembled in his palm like a burden from the past. "He was 80 years old, and I didn't know," he whispered to himself. "He's still working, and I haven't done anything for him in years." Guilt sometimes strikes suddenly. A sentence, a sound, an image. All the people you thought you had forgotten, the memories and bonds you neglected, suddenly pile up on you like an avalanche. Jimmy immediately called his father, Raymond Butler. "Dad, did you watch the video? Did you see Evelyn's video?" Raymond's voice sounded hoarse. "Yes, I just saw it, son. My God, how did she end up like this? How did we drift so far apart?" "I don't know, but today will be different, Dad. Today we're going to find her. We're going to do whatever it takes to help her. We have to. We're already too late." Jimmy hung up the phone and immediately called his assistants. A private flight was arranged between Miami and Houston. At the same time, private investigators, old contacts, and social media accounts were contacted. Finally, it seemed as if fate was helping Everly because of the delay. Within a few hours, information came in. Evelyn Brooks had worked as a night cleaner in a downtown Houston commercial building for the past 11 years. Jimmy asked without hesitation, "I need to be in Houston in 2 hours. Get the most beautiful flowers. Cancel all my appointments for today. This will be the most precious day of my life." During the flight, Jimmy watched the video over and over again without getting tired of it. With each viewing, his eyes filled with tears and his heart grew heavier. Evelyn's slow steps, the tables she cleaned, and her wrinkled uniform were all he could see, yet her face still stood tall with dignity. Some regrets can only be recognized when they are tangible. Jimmy understood that at that moment. Even if you don't intend to, silence, indifference, and forgetting can become the greatest betrayal. It was around 2:00 a.m. when Jimmy arrived at the building in Houston. The night guard hesitated before letting him in. "Excuse me, at this hour?" His sentence was cut short. "I'm Jimmy Butler. Evelyn Brooks works here. I need to see her urgently." The security guard looked at him, his eyes wide. "Are you really Jimmy?" "Yes, of course. She's the woman who made me who I am." The guard nodded, his eyes filling with tears, and led Jimmy to the 12th floor. The hallway was quiet. A cleaning cart stood against the wall. At that moment, a faint murmur came from inside. Jimmy approached the door. Evelyn was sweeping the carpet in a meeting room. She had headphones on and was humming songs to herself. Jimmy took a deep breath. Holding flowers, he quietly knocked on the door. When she turned around, their eyes met. Time stood still for a few seconds. Was it real, or was it a dream? "Miss Evelyn," Jimmy said, his voice trembling. I'm here to thank you and apologize for being so late." Evelyn took off her headphones. Her eyes were already filled with tears. At first she couldn't believe it. Then she approached Jimmy step by step. "Jimmy, my son, is it really you?" Jimmy bowed his head, overcome with emotion. "I should have looked for you all these years, but now I'm here. I'll never leave you alone again, Evelyn." Evelyn dropped the broom. She opened her arms. The two embraced. It lasted for minutes. All the distance of the past was erased by that embrace. "You've grown up," Evelyn said, looking at Jimmy's face. "But your eyes are still the same, son. The heart of that little boy is still here." Jimmy smiled and cried, "Because you gave me that heart." That night, Jimmy and Evelyn talked for 2 hours. They talked about the past, the pain, the loneliness, the pride, and the missing love. They talked about everything. "Why didn't you contact me, Evelyn? I would have given you everything. Because I taught you to be independent. I couldn't bear to be a burden to you, son. You had a life to live. I had done my duty." Jimmy held her hands. They were trembling and worn, but still gentle. "You're not alone anymore. Tonight is your last night of cleaning. You're not allowed to work anymore. Your prescription is now only love." Evelyn tried to say something, but the lump in her throat prevented her from speaking. "This isn't charity, Evelyn," Jimmy said. "This is like a child paying back a debt to his mother. You're still on the job. My children need someone like you, Evelyn." "Your children?" asked Evelyn, her eyes shining. "Noah, Micah, Ava, and Zuri. They all need to meet you. They need to learn everything you taught me. Only someone like you can raise them." Evelyn Brooks froze when she heard Jimmy's words. Her heart raced, and her eyes misted over. At that moment she felt deep down that the silent struggle she had endured for years, the exhaustion that lasted until midnight, and the prideful loneliness had meaning. "Jimmy," she whispered, "do you really want this, son?" Jimmy held her hands tightly. "Yes, for my family, for my children, and for myself. You taught me who I am. Now it's my children's turn. Evelyn, Mom." In that moment, Evelyn was confronted with a feeling she had ignored for years, feeling needed again. It was the reawakening of a woman's heart that had been a source of light for others throughout her life. The next morning, Jimmy turned his private plane around from Houston to Miami. But this time, there was an extra passenger on board, Evelyn Brooks. This wouldn't be just any ordinary flight. It was a journey that would change the course of her life. Jimmy had arranged for a home to be prepared for Evelyn in a quiet, green neighborhood just 10 minutes away from his home in Miami. But this was no ordinary home. Every detail had been carefully considered. Non-slip floors in the bathroom, grab bars, an emergency alarm system, elegant yet simple furnishings and frames filled with photos of a young Jimmy adorned the walls. This house was more than just a place of comfort for Evelyn. It was a new home where she could heal from the past and look forward to the future with hope. Moreover, it was not limited to just the house. Jimmy took immediate action and began establishing a special foundation, the Evelyn Brooks Foundation. The goal? Just like Evelyn, it would support elderly caregivers, teachers, and grandmothers who dedicated their lives to educating and raising children. The foundation would give them a dignified second life. Evelyn would never be alone in this life or the next. The most meaningful memories came a few days later, though. Jimmy, his wife, Layla, and their children invited Evelyn to their home in Miami. When the door opened, Noah came running in first. Then came Ava and Zuri. Finally, little Micah approached Evelyn shyly. Jimmy knelt down and turned to his children. "Kids, I want to introduce you to someone. This is Mrs. Evelyn. She taught me how to be a good man. Now it's your turn. She'll teach you too." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. At that moment, no salary she had ever received and no award certificate had ever meant so much to her. Noah approached her with curiosity in his eyes. "Dad said he learned how to treat everyone well from you. Is that really true?" Evelyn bent down to his eye level and began to explain. Nodding her head, she said, "Yes, my dear, and he learned that lesson very well. Now it's your turn. But don't worry, I'll always be here for you." Days passed. Evelyn had breakfast with the children in the morning, read to them, and helped them with their homework. In the afternoons, she accompanied Jimmy to his training sessions. Sitting in the passenger seat and watching him with the children she considered her grandchildren, her eyes sparkled. 1 year later, Jimmy organized a special halftime ceremony at a Charlotte Hornets game in Miami. The arena was packed. When the lights turned to the stage, Jimmy took the microphone and began to speak, his voice echoing throughout the arena. "Today, I'm not here to celebrate an achievement, but to pay a debt. I'm here to thank the woman who changed my life. This is Mrs. Evelyn Brooks. She raised me from ages 6 to 11. The most important thing she taught me was, true greatness comes not from talent, but from character." The 18,000 people in the hall stood up as one. Amidst minutes of applause, Jimmy continued, "But I must confess, Evelyn worked as a cleaning lady until she was 80. I couldn't find her. But now she's here with me. She's not just the nanny from my childhood. She's also the grandmother of my children. From this day forward, she is also an official part of the Miami Heat family. Please welcome our family values consultant, Ms. Evelyn Brooks." The entire hall was in tears, but the person crying the most was Evelyn, of course. "I've never been famous," she whispered to Jimmy, "but today, my heart is richer than it has ever been." Jimmy didn't stop there. The Evelyn Brooks Foundation quickly touched the lives of dozens of elderly caregivers. They provided homes, medication support, health care, and therapy. Everything reflected Evelyn's quiet struggle. Evelyn didn't sit idle. Every morning, she read books to Noah, Micah, Ava, and Zuri, teaching them small yet important life lessons. One morning, Noah became frustrated while solving a math problem. He threw his pencil on the floor. Evelyn approached him in her usual calm manner. "Noah, remember what we always say. Greatness comes from character, not talent," the child muttered. "That's right, baby. Giving up when things get tough doesn't make you special. Trying again does." Noah nodded and picked up his pencil again, just like little Jimmy had done years ago. The simple phrase that Evelyn Brooks had taught was being reborn in a new generation. The small but powerful whispers that taught how to overcome challenges, never give up, and be kind to others were growing in Jimmy's children. Every morning, Evelyn saw Jimmy's past in the eyes of these children. She felt more and more each day that she had shaped not just one person, but an entire generation. Jimmy was always by Evelyn's side whenever he could be. He would stop by after practice, participate in activities with the children, and sometimes sit quietly by Evelyn's side, listening to her stories and observing her. One day at dinner, Evelyn said to him, "You know, Jimmy, sometimes I think that I never thought I would see you again that night." Jimmy bowed his head, his eyes shining with gratitude. "I never forgot you over the years. But the truth is, not forgetting isn't enough. When you don't act, even love fades into silence over time." Evelyn nodded. "But you came, son. The night you arrived, a new purpose was born within me. You rebuilt not only the past, but also the future." As time flew by, Jimmy began preparing a big surprise. Evelyn's 82nd birthday was approaching. For this special day, he invited his closest friend and old neighbor from Houston, Clara Washington, to Miami. Clara greeted Jimmy with a small suitcase and a big smile as she got off the plane. "Thank you for giving me the chance to see her again, son," she said. "No, thank you, Clara," Jimmy replied. "You were the only one who stayed with her all those years when she was alone." On her birthday morning, Evelyn was getting ready at home when the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, she saw Clara standing there, her eyes filled with tears. The silence of the years was suddenly replaced by laughter and hugs. "Clara, Evelyn," she said, "do you remember? Years ago, you told me how proud you were of that little boy. Look where that pride has brought you." Evelyn took Clara's hand. "No, Clara, that pride didn't bring me here. True love brought me here. Jimmy did this out of love, not out of obligation, but out of heartfelt gratitude." That evening, Jimmy and Layla organized a special birthday dinner for Evelyn with the children. There were balloons, candles, and flowers on the table. There were also little cards written by each child. Micah's card read, "Thank you, Ms. Evelyn. You taught me not to give up." Ava wrote, "You taught me to say thank you to everyone in class." Jimmy's eyes filled with tears. Finally, he took a small gift box from his desk. Inside was a framed piece of paper. It was the first page of a book, "The Woman Who Taught Me to Fly." Jimmy looked at Evelyn. "I'm writing this book, Ms. Evelyn. I want people to know. Behind every successful man, there is someone who believes in him unconditionally. And behind me, from the very beginning, there was you." Evelyn took the frame with trembling hands. Her words were stuck in her throat again. She could only whisper, "Jimmy, Jimmy, this is the best gift of my life." 2 years later, Jimmy Butler broke an NBA record. At the end of the game, the entire arena gathered around him. But before raising the trophy, he turned to the stands. There, he ran to Evelyn, who was sitting in her usual spot. He hugged her tightly. "Mrs. Evelyn," he whispered, "this record is ours. It started with me not forgetting who I am and where I came from. You always reminded me, true greatness comes from character, not talent." Evelyn Brooks spent the rest of her life with the Butlers, surrounded by love and honor. She earned a place in not only the Butler family's hearts, but also in the hearts of thousands of people. The foundation supported hundreds of elderly teachers, caregivers, and mother figures who were no longer alone. As the world learned this story, it began to see another truth more clearly. Gratitude is an action, not just a word. Love is not just remembering. It's turning around and embracing. This is the story of how Jimmy Butler changed a life in one night, repaired the past, and gave hope to thousands. It was also the story of how Evelyn Brooks quietly raised a child who one day became the conscience of a vast world. Sometimes a woman's love can shape the character of a generation. A woman's love can shape the character of a generation. Now it's your turn. Think about the person who brought you to where you are today and touched your life. Maybe it's a teacher, caregiver, neighbor, or mother. If you could thank them, what would you say? If you've watched this far, where are you watching from, and who would you like to thank? Subscribe to our channel to be the first to hear about new stories. Join this growing family of real emotions.